let's talk about Kingdom Hearts, because there's a lot to talk about with this series. It's a series that somehow managed to combine the relatively wholesome characters and settings from Disney films with the brooding tone and characters of Final Fantasy, and then had all those overshadowed by its own original characters and concepts. It's a series where the still unreleased third iteration is actually going to be the 10th game in the series. It's a game series that made us think Goofy had died. So yeah, there's a lot to talk about. Now, for me personally, it's a series I have a strong connection to. I was utterly absorbed by the first Kingdom Hearts, and Kingdom Hearts 2 is not only my favorite PS2 game, it's one of my favorite games, period. And yeah, I've had my fair share of fatigue waiting for Kingdom Hearts 3 and instead getting a bunch of midquels, prequels, and sidequels, but I still end up liking all of those games. The Kingdom Hearts franchise is just one of those pieces of media where I know I would be a different person had I never been exposed to it. So, with the long-awaited release of Kingdom Hearts 3 finally, on the horizon, I figured, why not go back and play through all the games from beginning to end? And then I figured, why not do an entire retrospective series to talk about all the stuff that there is to talk about in this game series where there is a lot to talk about. So, whether you're a fan in need of a refresher, or someone who's only ever played Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2 and never touched any of the side games, or someone who just has never even been near a Kingdom Hearts game and is wondering what all the hype is about, this is my big, messy, probably gonna be too long Kingdom Hearts review, recap, retrospective. Prepare to be confused. The basic story of Kingdom Hearts is of a boy named Sora and his battle against the forces of darkness. He can do this because he has been chosen to wield a Keyblade, a weapon of immense power. Together with his friends, he travels to and from various worlds based on Disney films to ensure that light and good always triumph over evil and darkness. Again, that's the basic synopsis. What actually occurs from game to game is far more complicated, especially after the game started branching to the greater world outside of just Sora's story. I mean, there are friends that become enemies, enemies that become friends, downfalls brought on by a lust for power, apocalyptic scenarios that threaten to wipe out all of existence, storylines dealing in memory and how it constructs us as people, discussions on what it means to be a person and the nature of existence, overarching themes dealing in the duality of good and evil and the power of friendship, musical numbers, time travel, and ultimately the invisible connections that bind us all together in this thing called life and death. There is an unexpectedly large amount of death, or death-like states, in these games. Now, before we dive into the series proper, let's just have an episode talking about how the hell this even happened. I mean, sure, Disney is popular and Square Enix is popular, but they're not quite two great tastes that taste great together. You're not seeing the Ninja Turtles crossing over with Mario anytime soon, you know what I'm saying? Basically, Kingdom Hearts is the brainchild of Tetsuya Nomura. Now, he got his start as a debugger for Final Fantasy IV, he did some character designs for 5 and 6, but he didn't get his big break until Final Fantasy VII, where he was promoted to lead character designer. Cloud Strife, Tifa Lockhart, Sephiroth, Aerith, all his original designs. Not only that, but he helped design the battle system, being the one behind the iconic Limit Break system. Not only that, but he also took part in helping with the story, being the originator for one iconic scene that you're almost certainly familiar with. Yeah, suddenly all this makes a lot more sense, doesn't it? It was while working on Final Fantasy VII that Nomura became captivated by Mario 64 and its mechanics of moving in a 3D space. He wanted to make an action game using similar designs, but was disheartened when his coworkers told him that the only characters that could rival Mario in such a medium were all owned by Disney. Around that same time, Square producer Shinji Hashimoto ran into a Disney executive in the elevator. The two mused about a collaboration between their companies. When Hashimoto was later discussing this idea with Final Fantasy creator Hironobu Sakaguchi, they were overheard by Nomura, who, remembering what his coworkers told him, volunteered to direct the new game in collaboration with Disney. Disney was thrilled to be working with such a prestigious game developer and pitched dozens of ideas starring their characters. But Nomura didn't want to make a game starring Disney characters, he wanted a game starring his own original characters and story, with Disney more or less on the side. According to Nomura, he flat out said, "I won't make such games," in the middle of their pitch. Which I think you'll agree is pretty ballsy when you consider that this was still his first game as director, and they were, Disney. Eventually, Nomura pitched them the protagonist for the game he wanted to make, which, no joke, looked like this. Yeah, in case you can't tell, that's a proto-lion Sora complete with, and I quote, a chainsaw. Disney wasn't thrilled. Nomura toned down the design and replaced the literal chainsaw sword with the now iconic Keyblade. It helped that the president of Disney at the time, Bob Iger, was on board with Nomura's ideas and essentially told his underlings to shut up and let the man do his job. The game went into development with a 200-man staff team, at the time almost unprecedented in games development, made up entirely of Square Enix and Disney employees. One small snag. If you look at Square Enix's resume pre-2000s, you won't find a lot beyond traditional Japanese RPG as the genre of choice. No one at Square or Disney Interactive had ever made a game like this. According to Nomura, he had the finished project laid out in his mind, and it was just a matter of relaying it to his staff. There were moments of doubt and even panic, but Nomura kept the ship steady. When it came to the selection process of which Disney films would be turned into worlds for the game, the design team mainly looked at the most popular of Disney films, hence why no Black Cauldron, as well as which characters would be good to animate in 3D, hence why no Black Cauldron. The game originally was all about the gameplay and had a very simple story, but that all changed when Nomura had a talk with Hironobu Sakaguchi. Sakaguchi, one of Nomura's role models and mentors at Square Enix, told him that if the game didn't shoot for the same ideals as Final Fantasy, then it would be a failure. Nomura immediately took the advice to heart and set to work rewriting the story to what it is now. What may surprise some of you is that Kingdom Hearts was never originally supposed to feature Final Fantasy characters. Nomura was against the idea when it was proposed by his staff, but eventually relented in the face of overwhelming support. Nomura was uneasy about bringing in any characters he didn't design personally, which is why the first Kingdom Hearts only features Final Fantasy characters designed by the man himself, with a bit of a makeover to fit Kingdom Hearts' different tone. This would be the first time most of these characters would be modeled on the current generation of hardware, and the first time any of them would receive voice acting. Speaking of voice acting, the Kingdom Hearts series is renowned for its all-star cast of voice actors. Note how I said all-star, as opposed to professional, because barring the Disney characters who are all done by their original voice actors, most of the cast is celebrity voices. Rather than get some Yuri Lowenthal equivalent, they got actual child actors to portray the Destiny Island trio of Sora, Riku, and Kairi. Sora is voiced by Haley Joel Osment, fresh off his role as the creepy robot child in AI. Riku is David Gallagher, who you might know from Seventh Heaven and not much else. And Kairi is Hayden Panettiere, of Save the Cheerleader, Save the World fame. But the list doesn't stop there. The endgame villain is voiced by Titanic endgame villain Billy Zane. Leon is Angel from Buffy and Angel. And Cloud Strife, brooding badass Cloud Strife, is better known as this guy from General Hospital.
Puppies aren't just some sort of toy that you can put down when you're tired of playing with them, okay? They need attention, they need love all the time.
But I want to get tired of her. Ever.
Look, son. Wouldn't be right for us to take in a dog that we don't have the proper home for. You understand?
Why are you being so mean?
Look, son. No puppy in the story. You got it?
I hate you, Dad.
For the opening song, Nomura knew he wanted Hikaru Utada, most commonly known as simply Utada. At the time, she was one of the biggest pop acts in Japan, so this was like asking Britney Spears to do a song for Dark Alliance. Surprisingly, Utada not only said yes, but she agreed to sing the opening song simple and clean in both Japanese and English. So where does the name Kingdom Hearts even come from? Nomura says he was thinking about the Disney theme parks, and their various kingdoms, especially the recently completed Wild Animal Kingdom in Florida. But Kingdom was an admittedly lame title for such a game, and a hard-to-acquire IP. So since Heart was already a big part of the story, Nomura figured why not just mix the two together and create Kingdom Hearts. The first Kingdom Hearts kinda came out at the perfect time. Disney was more popular than ever, thanks to the recently ended Disney Renaissance of the 90s, which gave us such iconic films as Aladdin, Beauty and the Beast, The Little Mermaid, and all the other films that 90s kids associate with Disney. At the same time, animes like Dragon Ball Z were capturing the imagination of America's youth, thanks to their importation on programming blocks like Toonami. This is important because at the time of the early 90s, anime and games with similar art styles were still a pretty niche market in the West. But by the dawn of the new millennium, every kid on the playground recognized that spiky hair meant you were a badass. And yeah, I was one of those kids that practiced the Kamehameha wave when no one was watching, except I aimed mine at the sky in case it actually worked, so I didn't kill anyone. And while Nomura may have been late to the party with the whole moving in 3D space thing that games like Jak and Daxter had done a year earlier, along with, most of the games of the last generation of consoles, even Pac-Man beat him to the punch on that one. The 3D hack-and-slash genre hadn't really blossomed at this point. I mean, yeah, there was Devil May Cry a year earlier, and I suppose Legacy of Darkness, but these weren't kids' games. Or at least that wasn't their target demographic. The closest thing to Kingdom Hearts would be the 3D Zeldas, Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, with maybe a dash of Threads of Fate, but these didn't offer the same verticality and speed that Kingdom Hearts proposed, so it was kind of breaking new ground here. The first Kingdom Hearts was released in Japan in the March of 2002, with North America and Europe releasing in September and November respectively. It received stellar reviews, numerous Game of the Year awards, and is the 10th best-selling PS2 game of all time. Not bad for a game that came about from a literal elevator pitch. But that's enough on the development side of things. What about the actual game? Well, for that you're gonna have to tune into part 2. This was probably a mistake.